Salutations and welcome to Intro to Communication. This is the video lesson that goes with understanding group and team performance. Again, there's always PowerPoint and Word document lesson reviews posted to Blackboard. This is just a little extra discussing some of the terminologies and ideologies that we see from the textbook and we see in the PowerPoint and the video lesson. I'll try to be as brief so this video doesn't last 45 minutes, but it's not hard for me to ramble on. So it begins with talking about, do you enjoy working in teams? A lot of people will say no because there's just so much the unknown. You don't know who you're working with. Sometimes you do. And then, if you're more of a lone wolf worker, perhaps you don't like working in groups. But we start off discussing it. So let's talk about groups and team define. So the book starts off discussing small groups itself. Small groups are about 3 to 15 people that share a common purpose or a common goal. Again, if you see me look off, my notes are to the side over here, so it's so that I can keep somewhat in chronological order of the textbook. But small groups are about 3 to 15 people that are working toward a common purpose or goal. That makes sense. And it's different from primary groups because primary groups, they exist to fulfill basic human needs. And primary groups are your family and your friends. Those are primary groups. They are fulfilling basic human needs of socialization and all that. Now, secondary groups is where we're falling into small groups. Secondary groups, think of like study groups when you get together. And generally the purpose of study groups is to either study for a test or just work together throughout the course, or perhaps it is a project itself, so you're created within the study group to create a project for your class. All right, then there's therapy groups. Therapy groups also share, sorry, I got distracted. I set my arm down on something. Mutual support and treatment. Think of like Weight Watchers. That's a therapy group. The common goal is that they're there to support each other as they're on their weight loss journey together. There's lots of groups like that. And then like Alcoholics Anonymous group is also a group that the goal is to support each other throughout treatment and to be a support to have continual success. There's problem-solving groups, which these groups are together to solve a problem by overcoming one or more obstacles to achieve a goal. And then there's focus groups. Focus groups consist of people brought together to be interviewed so others can listen to and learn in order to gather information and opinions. Focus groups, they were real big. I don't know if they do them as much as they used to, but focus groups they kind of bounce ideas off for like products. That comes into. Now, when it comes to groups and teams, they talk about the book gives several reasons on the inner workings of groups. So group members feel a sense of belonging. When I say that is that the group members must realize and believe that they are in a group and not be excluded. Then they also exert influence on others in the group. With groups and teams, it's interdependent. Independent, we're solo. We're flying solo. I am very sorry for that reference. It was awful. But that's where my mind and my mouth went to. Anyway, groups work interdependently off each other. So it's the back and forth. And I'll say this again throughout these lessons, is that our verbal and nonverbal reflect our attitudes in a group. Even if we're not speaking, that's saying something. That's putting forth into the group. Group members may meet face-to-face or virtually. Now I kind of discussed this in the assignment section, but with today's world, group work and teams are much more open. Used to, it would be you have to work around everyone's schedule and a time. If you're in a team or a group, like if you were doing something for a class project, it would be, okay, so we need to meet. Well, is everybody free on this day, at this time, at this location? But now, because of technology, virtually makes it so much easier. With that, There can be text messages, or perhaps you have a group message or direct messaging. But you can also FaceTime or Skype or Zoom or do team meetings to where you may not be able to physically get somewhere because, you know, we're all crazy. We all have crazy schedules and there's so much to go around. The only thing, like, I know sometimes I have issues virtually at specific times because if my Wallings are at home and I can't get to a place quietly, they will be vying to get attention on my meeting. So I have to be careful of that. So there are advantages and disadvantages. And the book discusses it, the advantages and disadvantages of working in virtually. So advantages are it saves you on time and expenses because you're not having to physically go somewhere. So like say drive or anything. You can develop the same degree of trust among members as face-to-face. Ideas can be captured more easily and recorded because, you know, if it's a text message or a group message or maybe you're recording it, it can help structure your process and the focus. And then also some people are more comfortable virtual than they are face-to-face, so they may be able to express themselves and ideas within the group sharing that they wouldn't really do so much face-to-face, and that's fine. Some people shine virtually, and that's them. Now, some disadvantages is that it may take longer to develop trust, especially if you don't know the people. Making sure that everyone's participating. Like, it's easier probably to do text-to-text and group messaging than it is to do the virtual. Because, like I said, I have issues sometimes too virtually, just depending on the time of day. Increased speed of information that can be transferred. So maybe allows a little bit less time for reflection than what face-to-face would. When it comes to EMC communication, which again is electronic media communication, some may not evaluate the pros and cons as steadily, and technology is technology, so sometimes it works with us and sometimes it doesn't. So for that case, it can be a disadvantage. Anyway, let's move forward. We've talked about small groups. Now let's talk about teams. And a team is a coordinated group of people organized to work together to achieve a specific goal. So a lot of textbooks and a lot of scholars and a lot of folks will interchange group and teams. And that's fine. That's fine. But now we're going to break down what the book says for teams. Teams develop clearly defined responsibility for team members. So what does it say about that is that roles are given. It could be leadership, or it could be the reporter, or you could be this, and this. They're more defined whereas a group, it's kind of interdependently together. Whereas a team, you usually consist of roles. And there's clearly defined rules for the operating team. Think of when you play board games, there's rules, or card games, there's rules. They may not always be explicitly blazing in front of you, but there's rules that we all go by. You know, you can't, if you go to jail, go directly to jail, or you can pay this and get out, or once you pass go, you collect $200. You know, there's rules. And there may be rules within the team that aren't blatantly loud, but are created, such as we meet promptly on this time. If you're this, you're that late, you know, and it could be we meet every this rule, and then we take turns when we're speaking our ideas and thoughts. Teams also develop clear goals. Usually it's stated in such a way as we're here to win a game. That's straight teams like basketball, baseball, football, soccer. Insert here. It's to win a game. If it's an academic team, we're here to win the meet. Or it could be our group. If you think of like restaurants, sometimes they're trying to push sales of a new item or a special drinks or, you know, an appetizer. So I don't want to say they push that, but they're usually like, hi, welcome to blah, blah, blah. Would you like to try our new appetite, blah, blah, blah. And there could be incentives. The person who sells the most gets a paid day off. Or, I know that's probably a really extreme example, but it gives you an example. Another way teams will work would be teams, they said, to get to the North Pole before anyone else. But if you think of large teams, it could be to discover something, you know, there have been teams in Antarctica, or teams, archaeological teams, to discover, you know, tombs or richnesses buried underneath the ground or into caves or just in vast systems. Along with that, teams also develop a way of coordinating their efforts. They discuss how to, basically it's just them discussing how to obtain their goals. What can we do to win the game? What can we do to win this match? What can we do to sell the most product? There are differences between groups and teams, and we kind of discussed, like, teams have that more cohesive in as these are the gathered roles, goals, sets. This is how we get from point A, B, C. But they're not completely exclusive entities. Groups and teams are existing continuously, so interchangeably and continuously. The book really gives a great recap on groups and teams. So I'm going to say that real quick. Roles and responsibilities. Groups give individual responsibilities of group members may not be explicitly defined, whereas they are in teams. Rules for groups are often not written down or formally developed. Rules evolve depending on the group's needs, whereas they are in teams. Goals, group goals may be discussed in general terms, whereas in teams they are clearly defined and specified. Methods, group members may or may not decide to divide the work, whereas in teams there's usually a deviation of roles, and we just talked about that. Then it kind of goes over when not to work in groups and teams, and that's pretty straightforward. If you have a limited amount of time, it's probably best to do solo. When there's already an answer to the question, when the information is available from other resources, the internet, and is it not a bevy of interesting information? When the group or team is entrenched in an unmanageable conflict. So if there's going to be continuous fighting, it probably ain't going to be working so good. So, again, the lesson then goes into discuss group and team dynamics. It talks about roles. So, a role is a consistent way a person communicates with others in the group. And then it talks about different types. There's task, social, and individual. Task roles are ones that help a group achieve its goal and accomplish its work. That sounds funny. It's sharing research and conclusions with the group, taking minutes of the meetings and writing ideas on the whiteboard. So this is like your busy bee. This is the person writing down, making sure everybody, at the end, we can go back over. This is what we talked about, or they're writing it down on a board. Okay, well, you said this, and you said that, and you do this, and you do that. We met for about 30 minutes today. All right, great. Then there's social roles. This is roles that help a group manage relationships and affects the group climate. So this helps the flow of communication within the group. Smoothing over high emotions or low emotions and making sure that everyone stays on the same page emotionally, as not to have an emotionally charged moment, which can deter from the goal. So this is just someone that is really good at managing the relationships and the climate of the emotions. Then there's individual roles, and these are the roles that focus attention on individual rather than a group. So they don't help the group, they emphasize the individual accomplishments and issues. And this can be someone that dominates the conversation or maybe deters the conversation because they're constantly cracking jokes or complaining or whining or whatever the case may be here. Then it kind of talks about leadership roles. That's pretty straightforward. And then there's specific roles. And this is where we specify for someone. Now, I'm sure you've seen this. This is a breakdown of all of the different kind of roles, their names, descriptions, and examples. And it talks about tasks, social, and individual roles. Then we'll talk about balancing, which is, this is someone that balances your social and your task. They try to bring them back into a group instead of drawing attention to one individual person. All right, wonderful, great times. So let me sit this back down because I have my book here. There's team ground rules. These are behaviors that are expected of the team members, often spelled out in explicit rules. So this is where structured in groups and meetings come from. Within these, you know, it could be, we meet every Thursday at 8 o'clock. We'll be promptly on time. You arrive with your tools in hand and we are ready to go. You research this, you gather information on this, and you get this information. So those team ground rules that are set in the beginning, they create the structure upon which we move forward. Then it kind of talks about norms, and norms are the standards and that determine what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior in a group. So there's social norms and sources and enforcing them. I'm not really going to cover those too much. And they talked about status too, which is an individual's importance and prestige, and it kind of defines a high status minus low status and how they work within each other. And from that, it talks about power, and power is the ability to influence others people's behavior. So then they talk about the different kinds of powers that can happen within groups and teams, and there's legitimate, referent, expert, and reward power. Legitimate is power that stems from being elected or appointed. Okay, we elect our political officials. That's legitimate power. We appointed them. We said, hey, you're going to represent us. Not everybody may be happy about that, but there it is. There's referent, and this power that stems from being like. A lot of times if people like you, they'll listen to you. And that happens in groups and teams as well. If they consider you someone that is trustworthy and kind and considerate, you have more chance of being listened to within the group. Then there's expert power, and these are power derived from having expertise, skills, experience, and information. So if you're going to talk about putting out a fire, you're probably going to talk to a fireman. If you're going to talk about certain procedures, perhaps you talk to a specialist. You know, this is where power, you know, expert power comes from. You're talking to someone that has experience. If whatever the case may be here, you know, you're talking to someone who has skill and experience in that particular area. All right. Then lastly, it talks about reward power, and this is power that comes from the ability to provide rewards or favor. These are people that grant favors, money, or other rewards, and they have a power over people who can't provide such rewards, and they can bestow those. That's where it comes from. Then there's coercive and information power. Coercive is power that stems from being able to punish others. If you don't do this, you'll get in trouble type situations. And this is someone that like could cut your salary or lower your grade or demote you, put you in jail, or force you to do unpleasant jobs. That's where coercive power comes from. And it does show up in groups and teams. Then there's information power, and information is power, and it's power that results from having information that's important to the group and others that do not have. So you have, and that's not meaning, mine is coercive, that you yield and hold this power over others, you know? It just talks about the different styles of power. I'm going to discuss now the group and team development in this section. And there are 4 stages to group and team development. It's forming, storming, norming, and performing. But then a communication researcher, Aubrey Fisher, developed a more descriptive version of that 4-stage model. So let's discuss the forming, storming, and norming, performing section, which is forming. This is the initial phase of group development, which the group determines its goals and roles to begin to develop. This is otherwise known, we'll get into it, is orientation phase. This is where you get to know each other. This is where you get to know the group and you define what goals or what you're trying to achieve with this group and or team. And if there are roles given out, those are given there. And then there's storming. This is the second phase, and its group members experience some disagreement due to differing points of view, also known as the conflict stage. This is where you start putting well, I think we should discuss it this way. Well, I think we should cover it this way. No, I don't, you know, this is kind of where you've just formed and conflict is beginning to happen. But that doesn't mean the conflict is going to stay. This is where you're hashing out logistics. Moving into norming, which is the third phase, this is where the group finds its rhythms, confirms the norms within the group itself, and begins to accomplish the task at hand, later known as the emergence phase. They just kind of renamed them. So we have created the group, introduced ourselves, and started forming or assigning duties or roles. Then there's conflict as we begin to hash it out and figure it out. But then the third stage is us, you know, mellowing out and finding a rhythm. And then there's the performing stage, which is the final stage. And this is where the group accomplishes its goals and celebrates success. Now, like I said, the buffering. Did you see the turning there? So the communication scholar, like I said, Aubrey Fisher, kind of renamed or revamped it. So when we said orientation, I'm sorry, forming, they now call orientation. And this is, what are we doing here? What's our goal? Who are you people? What are we doing? What's my role? Okay. Phase 2, which was called storming, is now called conflict. This is who put that person in charge? I see our goals differently. I see our outcomes different. But I have different ideas. I have different ways to get there. Or I think there's some different strategies we can use. You see where the conflict comes. It's just where you're trying to hash it all out. Norming has now become emergence. And this is where something's happening. Decisions are being made. Issues are being managed. And the group is starting to move forward. You are finding your rhythm within the group, interdependently and independently. And then phase 4, which was performing, is now called reinforcement. This is where the group is aware that they are making progress, they are making forward, they're justifying their actions, they're starting to reward each other, and the team celebrates its success or rationalizes its failure. Oh, fun times. So that was a recap of understanding and communicating, well, understanding group and team performance. Stay tuned, folks, because the next video will be over enhancing group and team performance. Thanks so much. Bye.